Welcome to the Planeswalker Project.
What is up, ladies, gentlemen, and my NB friends? I hope you were all doing spectacularly today. So Dominaria, the OG plane, the home to many of our first days of Magic the Gathering, is, well, for us longtime players anyway. We are returning to the plane of Dominaria at long last, and we have finally seen the full spoiler of this set. And I gotta say, us Commander players got a lot. Like, I was originally going to just do a top 10 or something looking at my favorite legends from the set, but then they went and blew that out the windows. Why do you hate me, Wizards? I'm trying to do a show here. Anyway, rather than just glaze over the 80 million other legends from this set, I want to take a look at as many cards from this set that will likely see a home in Commander, at least before I go absolutely crazy. Special thanks to CardKingdom.com for sponsoring this... Wait, not sponsor... Why did you put that in the script if it's not, you're gonna get us in trouble. Stop. So anyway, feel free to hit that like button and let's get this train wreck a-chugging. Starting off, we have the bad boy Bayard, Steward of Argive. This amazing soldier is key for a Pillow Fort style deck, forcing your opponents to pay mana to attack. Absolute value. To me, this is just another less mana intensive Archangel of Tithes, only a little bit different. Also, can we take a moment to just admire this glorious new frame for legendary creatures? If you haven't seen Ristic Study's piece on card frames, this conveniently came out only a short while before these spoilers began, and I must say this is an incredibly elegant new look for Commanders. The Nalash Honor Guard is a pretty awesome card for those decks that will dump a ton of legendary creatures into play. You're going to see with some of the later cards just how plausible this has become. Legendary Matters is going to be a thing even in Commander. Banalish Marshal is awesome, you know, casual 3/3 Anthem Knight for 3 white mana. I love it. I think we might have a lot of new potential for a Knight tribal deck with some of the good stuff from this set. Board the Weatherlight features a new phrase that we've not yet seen in Magic, Historic. So historic cards, to my 3rd grade understanding of the concept, are artifact cards, legendary cards, and Saga enchantments. Quite a bit of ground that we're covering here, so Board the Weatherlight lets you dig through the top 5 cards and then snatch up one of those historic cards to add to your hand. So we have a rather unique tutorisk ability on a 2-drop spell. This is going to be something you want to grab up while you can, as I definitely see this having some Commander playability. You can go for any artifact, so it works for Voltron decks digging for equipment. You can get a legendary creature or a Planeswalker, as now all Planeswalkers are legendary, or you can go for a Saga, which we will look at those later, okay? Gonna want to grab those before it becomes $20. Denitha Capuchin, Paragon, is a brutal new Voltron commander. She is keyword soup for days, all the good ones to have on one card, and she cheapens up the cost of aura and equipment spells. Give her Death Touch and she'll be nigh unstoppable. Evra Halicron Witness is interesting. They remind me greatly of a legendary version of Tree of Redemption, only in white. They also have lifelink, making it possible to do some shenanigans with our build. I envision a deck where your goal is to have life gain for days, and while bolstering this with something like Sunbond, and then swapping out your life total for Evra's power and just annihilating everything. Not super big on that mana cost, but given the speed that this can drop and start killing, I can get behind it. Fall of the Thran is the first Saga we will look at. The way these work is when they enter the battlefield, they get a lore counter. Then you do whatever that level 1 ability does, which for this is destroying all lands. Gross. Then you put another lore counter after your subsequent draw steps, and then you carry out those respective abilities until it reaches 3 when you sacrifice it. Which for this is returning lands. I'm not super big on the level 2 and 3 abilities for this card, so I'd likely use this in a deck where I can sort of work to keep it at 1 level permanently, just blowing up lands as I go. What? History of Benalia is the next Saga. This one creates Knight tokens with Vigilance. If I didn't mention it before, Knight Tribal got quite a lot of new toys in this set. This card's penultimate ability buffs up your Knights until the end of turn. Not super bad, but not something I would include in anything outside of an actual Knight deck. Quende, Pride of Femeref, is a double striking legend that also gives your creatures double strike should they have first strike, so this makes anything having first strike even better. Double strike was one of those abilities that I took forever to understand, and Quende is extremely potent. Archetype of Courage just got 10 times better, giving all of your cards double strike. This one, though, I see as more part of the 99, but of course we're going to be trying to be building a deck with them just as the commander. You ever wanted to build an Angel tribal deck but didn't quite want the bulky 8 mana Avacyn as your commander? Well, we got Angels from this set. Lyra Dawnbringer is the new Baneslayer Angel. This thing also gives your other Angels a buff and lifelink. Her cost is also rather reasonable for an Angel, a tribe historically known for having a ridiculous high mana cost and a color that really doesn't ramp. I'd also like to point out that Lyra's flavor text is legitimately making me feel something. Oh wait, Angels now have access to a decent Selesnya commander that can ramp. Shalai, Voice of Plenty, gives you and all of your creatures and planeswalkers Hexproof. Also, I'm sorry to everyone who likes the 2 Sigarda cards. Very sorry. She also can put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control, so if you have excess mana sitting around, you can just funnel it into getting more power. And I feel that between Lyra and Shalai, we will have some new potential for Angel tribal decks. Next up is Tishar and Sister's Apostle. Again, we encounter the historic keyword. This one is a lot more similar to a Sun Titan for historic spells. This will be great for recursion in decks that deal with a lot of these spell types, and given some of the most dangerous planeswalkers in the game are 3 mana walkers, Liliana, Tishar can work with them. It's also a burb, so you know, chirp chirp. Triumph of Gerard is another saga, and a callback to a major character in the Magic storyline of old. We get +1/+1 counters on our largest creature, and then at the 3rd level, whatever that biggest creature we have gets both flying, first strike, and lifelink. Not bad, and at 2 mana, I can definitely see this making its way into a couple of decks. Okay, that was just white spells. Jeez, Wizards, you're trying to kill me here. So the Antiquities War is our next saga, and it lets you peak 5 and snag up an artifact for the first 2 levels, and then at the end, all artifacts you control become 5/5 creatures until the end of turn. I love this card, and I feel like some artifact-based decks like Breya, Muzio, Arkham Daxon, and Memnarch will want this in some capacity. So while I don't personally think this next card has a whole lot of power in the format, Artificer's Assistant is my new favorite card. Don't mess with the burb. Whenever you cast a historic spell, you scry 1. This is actually a very powerful ability on a very cheap body. Super Friends and artifact decks will definitely want this, and it's a 1/1 flyer. It's so much better than Stormcrow. Oh my god, I said that. The Mirari Conjecture is another saga. As I write this script, I realize there are actually a lot more sagas than I initially thought. Yeah. But this acts for the first 2 turns as a recursion of instants and sorceries. Then at the 3rd level, you get to fork all of your instants and sorceries. That's a lot of value. I'm not super big on that mana cost, but this will be great fun for Izzet decks for sure. We got some Wizards coming, so prepare. Good gravy, Yvonne already bringing the Wizards to the game. So this card is going to be gravy for Wizard tribal decks. Inala, anyone? This is literally Panharmonicon for Wizards on a bear. Yes, please? Narumeha, Master Wizards, is like a cool wizard lord that also lets you fork an instant or sorcery. I really like the wizards we got in this set, and I feel since vampires got support in Ixalan, cats in Amonkhet, dragons really didn't need any support because dragons, but we got some in Tarkir block, wizards are finally getting their time to shine on Dominaria. Precognition Field is another toy for Izzet Spellslinger decks. You get to shift through the top of your library and cast it if it's an instant or sorcery. Very nice. So, once again, we get a creature in a set that terrifies me to think that it's wandering around somewhere on this plane. The Reaper Leviathan, also known as Slyn Voda, is likely a new commander for a spot that Lorthos the Tidemaker once had, being prime for sea beasts and fishfolk alike. This thing is humongous, and it can sweep the entire board if your opponents aren't careful. Tetsuko Umezawa Fugitive is a really unique legend that I feel will make a home for himself in my Azuri Claw Progress deck. Tiny creatures often have a hard time getting through once opponents' board states are established. Tetsuko will make sure that they get through. I also live by this guy's flavor text. It's right on the money. Time of Ice is a rather lukewarm saga for me. It taps down things for 2 turns and then it bounces anything that's tapped. I guess if you manage to stagnate this to only 1 or 2 counters, you can effectively lock down your opponents, but I can only really imagine Derevi as being something this can interact with. Zahid, Djinn of the Lamp, is rather unique in that it dirtles with the commander tax, I think. Someone in the comments correct me if I'm wrong, but this guy pretty much just strikes me as a big beat stick with flying with really cool artwork. Really not a whole lot to say here, not a whole lot going for it, but it's a legend, so there you go. We're on to the black cards now, only 2 more colors to go. we're getting there. Anyway, Cabalic Paladin is another key piece for Super Friends decks, and maybe even artifact decks. Shocking an opponent every time we cast a historic spell will and can eventually add up, and if we drop this just before we start churning out the big cannons, this will be effective. 2 toughness is a little frail, but if opponents would rather waste the removal on this guy rather than the bigger threats, I'm fine with that. All of these sagas, good lord, I feel like I'm watching Dragon Ball Z. Chainer's Torment is rather fun, you know, it burns opponents and it gives us 2 life for 2 turns, and then it gives us a huge creature. Since this is Commander, we will likely get something in the double digits, though it will hurt us quite a bit in it, but I find this could easily be made up for with lifelink and life gain nonsense, which also would be good for this card. Demon Lord Belzenon is our next demon legend, and he's actually an Elder Demon. Really big demon, he gives us a lot of card advantage, maybe not as impactful as Grizzlebrand, but definitely up there. The Eldest Reborn has perhaps my favorite artwork of any card from the Saga series so far. This card is literally Nicol Bolas on an enchantment. It slowly robs opponents of their resources and then gives us the opportunity to steal from an opponent's graveyard. I like it. Josu Ves is more of that night good stuff I talked about earlier. It puts us into Orzhov colors, but we can find something for those cards. Liliana's Unfortunate Brother is quite the powerhouse, potentially giving us 8, yes 8, 2/2 zombie knights with menace. They don't come into play tapped. Yikes. Kazarov's Sengir Pureblood is the next in a line of vampire legends that are just modestly meh. I love the artwork for this, I love that we got another Sengir vampire, but the abilities and the mana cost just don't do it for me enough that I want to build around this. I mean, I guess it's not as bad as Baron Sengir. Lich's Mastery is a card I'm actually very intrigued about. This card prevents you from losing the game while it's in play. Whenever you gain life, you draw cards. Advantage right there. But whenever you lose life, you have to exile permanents or cards in hand or graveyard, and should it leave the battlefield, likely from you having to sacrifice it when you have nothing else, you lose the game. So it's very much an immortality card, but very high risk winner takes all should it leave the field for any reason. It just takes 1 overloaded Cyclonic Rift and it's game over. Actually, put it in a deck and donate it to an opponent and then make them sacrifice it. I like that idea better. We're gonna go with that. Phyrexian Scriptures was my favorite spoiler from the set, as the thought of the Phyrexians coming back excites me. Forget the Eldrazi and that whole mess. The Phyrexians were the true threat for the multiverse from my experience. This card is also ridiculously powerful, fitting in perfectly in a Breya deck. It kills anything that's not an artifact, and then it exiles all graveyards before it leaves. Rites of Belzenlock. Looks like it could be from a death metal album cover, and it helps make black cleric tokens. It also ends by making a 6/6 demon, which is very useful in Commander. I'd like to put this in a token deck actually, as we have many ways of doubling or even quadrupling our token output. Torgar, Feminine Incarnate, is a pretty neat legend in that you can sacrifice creatures to cheapen him by 2 mana for each one sacrificed. It also halves an opponent's life total when it hits the field. I also like how this is another way of subtly interacting with the commander text. You just sacrifice a few dudes and suddenly, boom, 2 mana 7/6. Sorry Billy, your life total just got halved. Ouroboros is perhaps my favorite black commander at the moment from this set. It fills a niche that I longed for years, a Spectre legend that deals with discard mechanics. We have a line of Spectre and Ghostly cards from throughout Magic's history that deal with forcing opponents to discard whenever they deal damage, but we never had a legend that could run as that commander unless you go into a different color like you do with Nath. Ouroboros is a good candidate and likely a good contender for a mono-black pauper commander. Whisper Blood Liturgist is pretty neat as a recursion and necromancy commander. I'd like to try this out in Marin before I start building a deck where Whisper stands as the commander. You thought the Gitrog monster would be the only legendary frog we ever got? Here's Yargle. It's a nice big vanilla monster. Works for me, but it dies to Bolt. Alrighty, now on we go to the red cards. Champion of the Flame is going to be very useful in Voltron decks as another creature we can bump up with the armors. It's also got Trample, which is a nice ability to have on a creature that can get bigger. The only problem is that it's mono red, so we're going to need to have a red inclusive commander in order to use this. The first eruption is pretty neat that it pings non-flyers, then it ramps, and then it burns each creature even further. It's not super impactful anyway, but it's something to note for a Saga. The Flame of Keld is our next Saga, discarding our hand when it hits the field. It's great for madness builds, and then we draw cards off of it the following turn. Lastly, it'll give us a 2 damage buff to any damage our red sources deal this turn. It's okay. Jaya Ballard is back as a Planeswalker this time. She is going to be great in Izzet Spellspringers, giving us ramp for our instants and sorceries. She also gives us card draw, though I feel like I'd rather use her mana ramping +1. Her emblem also gives us an Eternal Snapcaster Mage ability, which is incredibly useful. I love her. Ugh. Squee, you little bugger, you just won't stay dead, will you? I think Squee might be one of the commanders that you never have to pay commander tax for, because once he dies, you just bring him back from the graveyard without paying extra. Sure, he really doesn't do much else but die a billion times, but it's a goblin, what do you expect? Valduk, Keeper of the Flame, is very much in line with what Kemba Ka Regent, in that he spawns 3/1 tokens with haste and trample for each aura and equipment attached to him. While it is a bit buggy that he's mono red, I definitely can see him making waves as his own commander of a Voltron style deck. Next up is Varric's Bladewing. Not a bad body for 4 mana dragon, but we also have the potential to kick it and then make Karok's Bladewing as well, which is basically a second version. Now, on to green, the only color I actually know what I'm talking about. Yay! Run the Lonely King is perhaps the best card for Rafik. Harambe can hit the battlefield as a potential 10/10 and doubles its power should it be attacking alone. This would be even better when you consider Rafik's ability to give double strike as well as all the other exalted nonsense. Give it flying and trample and you can make quick work of opponents. Marwyn the Nurturer is giving Rishkar and Azuri a run for their money. This elf is great in elf ball strategies, letting you buff her more and more, all the while increasing the mana that she'll be producing. This can become immense, and I highly recommend adding her to any and all green decks with any amount of elves in it. Also note that the green mana she produces is dependent on her power, not how many elves you control, not how many +1 counters are on her. The Mending of Dominaria is a great saga. You can bring cards back from your graveyard, and at the end, you can return all lands from the graveyard to the field. This is perfect for Gitrog monster, who will likely give you plenty of lands in the grave to make the best use of that ultimate ability. Multami is another good card for Gitrog, getting buffed the more lands you have in play and in the graveyard. It could get huge, it also has trample. Correction, Song of Freyalise is my favorite saga, and it's going to be the one I'm going to be playing in everything. Freyalise is my favorite Planeswalker, and this card gives you so much value to your board. It's an uncommon? For 2 turns, all of your creatures become Birds of Paradise, and then you get a counter placed on everything. And those creatures become vigilant, trample, indestructible until the end of turn. This is a win condition right here. Alrighty, now we are on to the multicolored cards. This is almost over. Adeliz is a great lord for Wizard Tribal, giving a buff with every instant or sorcery spell you cast, and this will work great as both a standalone commander for Izzet Wizard Spellslinger, or as part of the 99 and something like Anala. Next is Arvad the Cursed. As I mentioned before earlier in this video, Legendary Matters is a theme of Dominaria, and this guy gives our legendary creatures quite a big buff. This is great in Voltron decks featuring Orzhov colors, and his Death Touch and Lifelink make him not pleasant to block. Do you remember when I said that Orzhov knives were likely going to be a thing? Well, Ariel, Knight of Windgrace, is here. She's a 4/4 Vigilant Knight who can create a Knight token. She can also tap as many Knights as you'd like, and destroy target creature with power less than or equal to the number of Knights that you tapped. She's very flexible, very powerful, and we are definitely going to be covering this in the near future. Dargaz is a very interesting commander. We're in Jund color, so Prosh, you have a little bit of competition, but should this creature die, instead it gets exiled with 3 egg counters. You remove the 3 egg counters like you would with Suspend, and then Dargaz returns. So it sort of works like a Suspend card, just in a really weird way. I like it, but I don't know how I feel about it as a commander. Garna the Flood Flame. is a powerful Rakdos commander. She gives haste to your board and then returns everything that died this turn to your hand. So this will give you quite a few decks that will fill up the graveyard through board wipes, sack effects, discard, and given that she has flash, it can be great recovery to a board wipe. Grand Warlord Rada. Bringing the ramp in a manner similar to Xenagos, I really love the idea of this being an elf deck that goes on the aggro more so than combo. This also will likely do well with cards like Aggravated Assault, giving you extra combat steps and extra mana ramp. Halar is another Gruul-colored elf. They are perfect for kicker decks, putting a counter on Halar, and then Halar deals damage equal to the number of counters on them to each opponent. You dump a ton of counters on them and singe an opponent to death. I love it. Also, Halar is an archer as well, making them a fine candidate for an archer tribal deck. Yes, it will be a thing. Joyra is back. As if her appearance in the recent duel decks wasn't hint enough, this time she comes back as the massive card engine for historic decks. Super Friends, artifact decks, and should somehow a Saga deck become a thing of Commander, she has you covered and you will be drawing a lot of cards off of her. So, when Ramos came out in Commander 2017, I was actually really happy we got a pretty generic 5-color commander that was relatively neutral in strategy and didn't have something that screamed build slivers or build dragons. Sadly, he has been replaced by Joda, who, while having Jeskai colors in his casting cost, is in fact a 5-color commander due to the 5 mana symbols being in his text box. Being able to pay rainbow mana for all of your spells instead of their normal casting costs will make for explosive plays even earlier. You got a big Eldrazi you want to drop? Forget paying 10 mana, how about 5 mana? You want to play Enter the Infinite? Pay 5 mana. This is going to be used for a lot of brews and is another contender for an upcoming brew on this channel. Look out for it. I swear, we have to be coming to an end at some point. Muldrothra, the Gravetide, is an incredibly vicious Sultai commander who lets you play up to 1 permanent of each type from your graveyard each turn. You know how Carador lets you play a spell from your graveyard once a turn? Well, Muldrothra lets you play a lot more. You get to play a land, a planeswalker, a creature, an enchantment, and an artifact. They're all fair game. Wrath Capuchin is another powerful card for Super Friends decks. You can now just cast your spells during your opponent's turn, so how about flashing in a Jace or a Liliana just as an opponent's turn ends? It's a good feeling. Rona, Disciple of Gix, is yet another Super Friends ready card. You can exile cards from your library and then cast them with Rona's ability. This will make for some fun shenanigans when you're manipulating your top deck, exiling the top deck, and then you cast stuff. Shanna is a great token commander, getting stronger with the more creatures you control, and she has pseudo hexproof. I feel like she's going to do great in a deck like Tristani, and she can definitely stand her own on her own build. Slimefoot the Stowaway is my favorite legend from the set. He is perfect for a Saproling tribal deck, which is an option also viable for Gave, Guru of Spores. We got a number of spells in this set that are suited for Saproling tribal, but Slimefoot burns each opponent whenever you have a Saproling dies. We can also use him to spawn those Saprolings. You put Parallel Lies in Ashnod's Altar, and you have a win condition with him. Look at that. We did a deck tech for a commander within a set review. Aren't we clever? Almost done. We have Tatyova, another Merfolk commander that's perhaps on par with the previous champion of the fish. Tatyova gives us both card draw and life gain on landfall. And while not quite a Merfolk ability, it will give us a lot of value in the long game as we're going to be drawing more each turn and gaining more life to sustain us. Teferi, the Doctor of Dominaria, comes in as an Azorius Planeswalker this time, letting us untap our lands, shooing away a non-land permanent, and then we get an emblem that rivals Venser's emblem, which we now get to exile any permanent an opponent controls every time we draw a card. That is bonkers. Draw a few cards, oh sorry, your lands are all exiled, oops. And last but not least, Tiana, Ship's Caretaker, is a great Boros Angel who actually could function well as a Voltron commander. She's got flying in first strike, is reasonably costed at 5 mana, and returns your auras and permanents to your hand should they go to the graveyard. This is powerful, yes, but I wish the ability would work when she's not on the field. So in the event of a board wipe where she and your artifacts die, she'd be able to save the things attached to her. New Karn is pretty cool. We get some good card advantage. His ultimate is useful in token decks should you be able to get some extra tokens out. Nothing super broken, but it's very nice to have as a non-ultimate on a walker. Now for some artifacts. We do have a few worth mentioning. Some of them are actually really good. Black Blade Reforged is unique that it has 2 equip costs. You can pay 7 mana to equip it to any normal schlub of a creature, or you pay 3 to give it to a legendary creature. This will make it incredibly valuable to your commander, as it gives +1/+1 for each land we control, so that's going to be even more power to your commander. Damping Sphere is probably going to find its way into some stacks lists and some hate bear strategies, slowing down Karuz and making heavy land ramp like Gaia's Cradle completely unnecessary. Forebear's Blade gives both Vigilance and Trample and reattaches for free after the previous owner dies. Very nice. Gilded Lotus is back, baby, with some gloriously gorgeous new artwork. Helm of the Host is incredibly powerful in Voltron builds. Nearly every Voltron commander I run would benefit from having this thing out. Giving yourself extra copies of Legends would normally be rather impractical, as the Legend rule would kill the excess copies. But this gets around that ruling by making the tokens non-legendary. Howling Golem is Howling Mine on a stick, making for some pretty nice group hug stuff. Joyrus Familiar is another adorable bird that also cheapens the cost of historic spells. Also, it's colorless, so it'll go into literally any Super Friends deck. Mox Amber is perhaps the most valuable card from this set for Commander. It literally becomes a command tower while you control your commander. I see the balancing in its requirement for a legendary creature or planeswalker to be in play for it to work, but once you get the requirement met, you're going to quickly ramp up. Thran Temporal Gateway is also very powerful, letting you cheat historic cards into play. This makes your legends in hand, your planeswalkers in hand, completely safe from counter spells, and all for just 4 mana? This will be, again, a card for Super Friends. Are you tired of hearing me say that? I'm tired of hearing me say that. Thraxos, Scourge of Krug. That is one hell of a name, my good friend. This card is going to be a really weird legend in that it's colorless, it's huge, and it actually requires quite a bit of timing to get it to work. You have to cast spells to untap it normally, unless you have some voltaic key things, but otherwise it becomes literally a massive battering ram. Now, I do have some parting thoughts on this set. Years ago, a block went down in history as one of the worst sets in Magic, the Kamigawa block. The theme for the set was Legendary Matters, and many of the creatures from this set were legendary creatures. Because of the incongruency with the legends, and among other causes, the set was not nearly as successful as it could have been. I look at this set, Dominaria, and feel that retreading the same waters of Legendary Matters is a rather risky move, but to me, it looks like it's been done in a much more appropriate and functioning manner. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on this as well. Let's talk about it in the video comments, shall we? I hope you enjoyed this video. Good lord, I took up over a half hour of your time. I hope it was worth it. If you enjoyed this video, remember to tap that like button. You can also subscribe and maybe ring that bell so YouTube can try to remind you when new videos come out. We also have a Patreon should you want to help improve this channel's quality and equipment. And as always, I will see you rock stars next upkeep.